Adventure Time is one of the most successful and influential animated shows of the last 10 years. Its fantastical world filled with zany and memorable characters exploded onto Cartoon Network in 2010 with top-notch animation and a crazy wide variety of stories to tell. The show ran for 283 episodes and went on to win 8 Primetime Emmys in 10 seasons. Obviously, this show is beloved by many, including myself. I remember going to the movie theater as a kid and seeing a trailer for Adventure Time, and I immediately fell in love with it. And just in case there is any doubt out there in the audience, I, no joke, rep Adventure Time every single day, as I have a little knockoff BMO watch face on my little knockoff smartwatch. So a knockoff watch face for a equally knocked off Apple Samsung smartwatch thing. So genuinely, this is something I didn't think about until making this video, but I'm repping Adventure Time every single day with this watch. I absolutely adore this show. And since I absolutely adore this show, today we are going to go back to where it all started. We're going to be looking at the pilot for Adventure Time, going over the differences and similarities to the final show, and even a little bit of history. My name is Mr. Cow. Let's get into it. The Adventure Time pilot was created by Pendleton Ward. The pilot is about 7 minutes long and follows Penn and Jake, something we'll get into a little bit later, as they try to save Princess Bubblegum from the evil Ice King. Pretty straightforward, just about what you would expect from an Adventure Time pilot. Where things get really wacky is in the pitch for this pilot. The pilot was originally pitched to Frederator Studios, and in January of 2007, it aired on Nicktoons for the first time. The pilot would also air on Fred Seibert's Random Cartoons in December of 2008. Adventure Time was one of 3 shows from Random Cartoons to get turned into a full series, the other 2 being Bravest Warriors and Fanboy and Chum Chum. Now, I just mentioned the name Fred Seibert, and he plays an important role in this story. In case you don't know, Fred Seibert is the Fred in Frederator. He has helped to launch some of the most successful animated shows and creators of the last 20 years. I could do a video on just his accomplishments and it would be hours long. To say this guy has influence in the world of animation would be a drastic understatement. However, despite Frederator's close ties with Nickelodeon and legendary reputation, the network would pass on Adventure Time when it was initially pitched, but Nickelodeon wouldn't make the same mistake twice in a row, right? They'd have to see the potential in Adventure Time in a second pitch meeting, right? Right? No. Turns out Nick just wasn't into it. But why? Well, lucky for us, the legendary Fred Seibert cataloged this experience on his blog. He said, quote, "The short was done with only a few hiccups. As hands-on animators, the team was a little gun-shy about doing the animation in Korea. We prevailed since it would be great practice for how the TV industry worked. And Penn had accomplished the almost impossible, a cartoon that seemed to be influenced more by early 20th century animations, those spaghetti arms and shape-shifting bodies, than Looney Tunes. A film whose surrealism was tempered by an incredibly sly, at the same time, in-your-face humor. Wow, when Penn's short was done, everyone knew it was something special. Except, it seemed, the powers that be at Nickelodeon. I knew it was going to be a problem. Here was a film that was like nothing else, drawn with a clear, simple, and wholly original design. It was funny beyond the beyond, but was that character in preschool? I'm 12 years old. How much clearer did it need to be? Was the humor for adults or kids? The executives were completely confused. I anticipated their focus groups by pointing out the 4 reasons they'd come back with a no. They returned with the 4 plus 1 more. Rejected. What was wrong with these people? Nickelodeon had an exclusive option to make a series on Adventure Time. So I went back and back and back and back 5 times altogether to different executives in different divisions. It's not a Nickelodeon show. What the hell does that mean? What it meant Bottom line is that 1, that particular executive team was brain dead, and 2, they didn't really want to produce a show with me. There was a feeling I'd been in business with them for too long, and had gotten too much from them, and that I was the former management team's talent. Nickelodeon was moving on. At that point, I'd had an exclusive producing deal with Nickelodeon for several years, because I was also a programming consultant to the network. There was a feeling that I knew their secrets and they didn't want them shared with the competition. This situation usually meant that a rejection of one of our show pitches had no other life. But this time, I kept going back for more pain. 5 times Nick said no to Adventure Time. Finally, I'd had enough and told the president to please rip up my exclusive. It had been a good decade in their clutches, but I was done. Any place that couldn't see that Adventure Time was a winner wasn't the place to be locked down. Nickelodeon saved a lot of money, and honestly, that management team couldn't care less about me, Penn Ward, or Adventure Time. The rest of the saga is, as they say, history. I brought the show over to Cartoon Network. Former programming head Michael O'Wheeling, now the president at Adult Swim, he convinced CEO Stuart Snyder, and with a bit of push, the new chief content officer, and we were off to the races. It was that rare moment when everything changed. Cartoons were never the same after Adventure Time. End quote. Now, that's a whole lot to process, but the Cliff Notes version is 5 times. Nickelodeon had 5 opportunities, according to Fred Seibert's blog, to pick up Adventure Time, one of the most successful, influential animated shows of the last 30, 40, 100 years even, you could say. It was pitched 5 times to 5 different groups of executives, and thanks to some really dumb corporate policies and politics and stupid people thinking they're smarter than they actually are, Nickelodeon turned down Adventure Time in exchange for Fanboy and Chum Chum. And we all know how that decision went. Also, that bit about Nickelodeon execs being brain dead, that was pretty savage. We're gonna have to start calling Fred Seibert Fred Savage. I know that's already a guy. That's the wizard or whatever from the 80s. That's the Wonder Years guy, but move over Fred Savage. There's a new Fred Savage in town. But with that, we're ready to take a look at the pilot for Adventure Time. We've got all the background out of the way. We've got this crazy storyline done. But what about the actual pilot? Well, like I said in the opening, the plot of the pilot episode is Finn and Jake are going to rescue Princess Bubblegum from the evil Ice King. And as far as that story goes, there really isn't a whole lot to say. It feels like a rough cut of an episode of Adventure Time. It feels like the show already in this pilot episode. They do a really good job of capturing the essence of what Adventure Time was going to be, especially in those early seasons, in just 7 minutes. But while there's not a whole lot to say about the plot of the episode, because it's pretty simple and straightforward, and the animation I could talk about a little bit, but it's clear this is something that was put together as a pilot pitch type thing. It's not fully produced animation. It was a small team working on it, so I'm not gonna nitpick the animation or anything like that. But there is some stuff to say about the characters and the voice acting. Starting with the characters, something I mentioned earlier, Finn's name in this pilot episode is actually Penn, clearly named after Pendleton Ward. The reason for this being changed? I have absolutely no idea, and I could not find any reason for the change. I don't think it would have mattered if he was Finn instead of Penn, or Penn instead of Finn. Either way, it's fine. We got Finn, not Penn. Not the biggest deal. Another difference that caught me by surprise, but honestly shouldn't have caught me by surprise because it's still weird, is Lady Rainicorn, who's just called Rainicorn in this episode. She doesn't speak Korean, which is something I remember very, very clearly from the original show. Of course, it's something that's borderline iconic with that character, just that she speaks Korean. And no one else in the show really speaks Korean, except for, no spoilers here, some other characters will speak Korean later, but I'm not going to spoil that for people that haven't seen Adventure Time. But she speaks gibberish, more or less, D. Bradley Baker gibberish. It seems D. Bradley Baker does in fact voice her in this episode, which we'll talk more about that when we get into the voices section. But that's a little different as well. And that's about it for characters. Honestly, the characters are pretty consistent across the board. It's only 7 minutes too, so it's not the most fleshed out. I could point out some differences with how the Ice King acts and Princess Bubblegum acts, but they're really not that noticeable unless you are like insanely dedicated fans of the show, and you would see that and be like, oh, that's weird, that's out of character. It's not that big of a deal. What's really different is the voice acting. Like I mentioned, D. Bradley Baker, who you know from literally every cartoon ever. He's Klaus in American Dad, that's a big one, but he's been in everything. He voices Lady Rainicorn in this pilot episode, and a little tidbit about this, I didn't know this until researching for this video. Lady Rainicorn is voiced by Nikki Yang in the official series, and she would get her lines in English and then translate them into Korean before doing them. She's also a storyboard artist on the show, which is just a fun little tidbit I thought I'd bring up for fans of the show, because I didn't know that. Maybe you did. I just thought it was neat. Princess Bubblegum is voiced by Paige Moss instead of Hynden Walsh. Paige Moss is sort of an unknown. I at least am not familiar with a lot of her work. She was in like a few episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then I believe retired after this pilot episode. So there's a slight difference there, but where it gets really interesting are with the voices of Penn, or Finn of course, and the Ice King. Finn in this pilot episode is voiced by Zach Shada, I believe is how you say it. But in the official show, Finn is voiced by Jeremy Shada, who is Zach's brother. And the story goes that when it came time to make the first season of the show, Zach's voice had changed too much, and so they decided to go with his little brother Jeremy, which is a little heartbreaking, a little bit hilarious that you do a voice for a show and it takes a little while to get made, and then they're like, actually, we're gonna go with your little brother because you two sound identical and we might be able to get a little more mileage out of his voice. And sure enough, Jeremy Shada went on to voice Finn for the entirety of the show, which, boy oh boy, does it suck to be Zach in that situation. Cherry on top of it not being great to be Zach Shada, he had to voice Comet in Space Chimps 2, the main character in one of the worst animated sequels I have ever seen. I did a whole video on it, which we'll have linked at the end of this one. Poor dude. I feel for you, Zach. That's a bad way for that cookie to crumble. And lastly, the Ice King is not voiced by Tom Kenny in the pilot. He is instead voiced by John Kasser, who, if you don't know who that is, he is the famed voice of the Crypt Keeper in Tales from the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt.
Now, I love Tom Kenny. I think he does a great job as the Ice King. I believe he is iconic. However, I think John Kasser could have done just as good as Tom Kenny. I love the Crypt Keeper. I love this dude's voice acting. Don't know a thing about him personally, but that Crypt Keeper voice is great, and he's pretty dang good in this pilot episode. It sounds a little bit different and a little off just because I'm so familiar with Tom Kenny.
Stop meddling, boy! You and your magical dog can't harm me.
But it was really funny to see that the Crypt Keeper was almost the Ice King, because I always thought their voices sounded kind of close, even when Tom Kenny was doing the voice. So I just thought that was neat. And with that, that's pretty much all there is to say about the pilot itself. As a whole, it gives a brief glimpse into what was to come with Adventure Time, which of course is exactly what a pilot is supposed to do. In 7 minutes, I think Pendleton Ward and Company did a great job at giving a rough idea of what their show was going to be. And as we heard Fred Seibert say just a few moments ago, the rest was history. Adventure Time went on to be one of the most successful and, again, influential animated shows of the last 10, 20, 30, 40, however many years, possibly of all time. And with that, I leave this story here. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you thought of all this down in the comment section below. If there's other stories you want me to talk about in the world of animation, other pilots to look at, please let me know. I do try to read every comment on this channel, so do not be shy. I hope yours will not be overlooked, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.